Hi, I'm Alice, and I'm here with Indine Productions, and we're talking with people in the community about the La Paz County Sheriff race. Would you like to tell us who you are and what your thoughts are?
Sure. Alice, pleasure to meet you. I'm glad to be here. My name is Dennis Vosper, and I'm a resident here for 2 years now, a little over 2 years. Have been connected with the town for longer than that. I'm actually the general manager for both the local radio stations, and so used to work sales from San Diego, California. I didn't bring any of California with me though when I came. So now I'm doing that. I'm also running for town council. In the primary, I did get the highest number of votes, so I am working towards some change here in the local community as well. I've got 5 kids, and I've been married come 24 years come October.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I just have a few questions here for you. The first one is, who do you support for La Paz County Sheriff and why?
Good question. For the Sheriff's Department race, I am supporting Mike Roth. There's 3 candidates running. The 2 that I think we're going to be in there it's going to be a battle between Mike Roth and William Ponce, the current chief of police in Quartzsite. The reason I support Mike is because he's an outside of the arena. I think so long what we've been putting up with in law enforcement, not only in Quartzsite, but in Oceanside, where I come from, and a lot of other towns, is you've got the professional law enforcement. So time and time again, we're hiring just the professionals, and we're getting the same thing day in, day out, month, year to year. And what we're seeing is there's a real embrace. And I know the chief of police here likes to really talk up his FBI schooling. And where that is a positive for him, and he claims to be conservative, but this is actually, in the view of a constitutionalist, that's a negative thing. So what we see going on, there's in the progressive movements in our country, we're seeing what's called the nationalization of police. So more and more federal control, and so Chief Ponce has, in many ways, bought into this. Ponce does claim to be a constitutionalist, but really loves the FBI school. And so he brings that in, and I believe there's a real nationalization. That process has begun. So there's that influence. Whenever there's federal training, there's the funds, equipment. I believe some of the equipment that we have out there came from the military. So there's this, the hand that feeds you tends to keep feeding you. And there are things that force that to continue. So as far as with Mike in particular, Mike is a constitutionalist. He's a patriot. He is a little brash at times, and I'm sure the public will see that. But at the same time, Donald Trump is brash. And for many of the same reasons that I like Trump. Again, Trump is not the professional. So he came in, and people said he's not going to be a good president because he's not got the experience. He's not an attorney. He's not a politician. So what we see there is a lot of good success. He's not perfect, but it's better than anything I've seen in my lifetime. And I believe that it's time to have somebody from outside of the professional law enforcement to come in. Now, the position of sheriff does not need to have a police background. It's an elected position. It's more of an administrative position, and somebody who has a lot of good administration skills, mainly the strong constitutional backing. That is key to be able to have that strong return to the Constitution. And that is the core reason why I support Mike Roth for sheriff, is because the dedication is unequivocal. It is Constitution, and he's not going to waver from that. And that's what we need as a sheriff.
Okay, wonderful. So I say you're a constitutionalist.
I am.
What do you think of local law enforcement receiving federal police training?
Okay, yeah, I touched on that a little bit. So with that is again, there's a tie-in anytime that, there's actually a pattern that goes on. And we've seen this in recent time. There's a crisis that occurs. And in the midst of this crisis, the people and the government say, well, the local police are overwhelmed. Even right now, you take the riots that are going on, and the local law enforcement's overwhelmed. You've got folks that are calling for the nationalization of police. So in the middle of that, part of that process, you've got new training. So the solution for the police that can't control their communities is additional brand new training, new tactics, funding. And so this creates the pacifier, it creates the never-ending need for those things. as we know, anything from the government comes with strings attached. So the same as with policing. There's within the new structures, especially under the Department of Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, Department of Homeland Security created fusion centers. So there's a lot of the local police are tied into these fusion centers, which is disseminating information, labeling people extremists, labeling people domestic terrorists. And a lot of these, who they name, are former military, even Ron Paul supporters. This goes back a few years. There was a report that was issued and it specifically told you could look for Ron Paul bumper stickers, and the police need to be aware of them as potential threats. So these control, the local police in and of themselves would not look at a Ron Paul supporter as a domestic terrorist. But the Fusion Center says you need to do this. So the training that is coming down is, I think, a form of indoctrination. And so you're indoctrinating our local police, and it's coming right under the umbrella of federalization and nationalization. So the things of the training and the funding create strings. It creates problems to where we're losing local control over over the police themselves.
Okay. And what are the downsides to participating in these programs?
Yeah, and I think unfortunately I kind of answered it earlier there too. But so the downside is the loss of control. And again, with Chief Ponce really liking the FBI training. The FBI training is completely all a part of the nationalization. Those are elements of nationalization, and he doesn't oppose those. I have talked to him, and he does say that, well, he nitpicks. Unfortunately, what I see on the street is those things are still implemented. We're still going with the asset forfeiture. We're doing the very things that are part of the federalization, the nationalization. So that's the definite downside. So we need to get back again to the Constitution. And the only candidate that is a strong candidate for a strong constitutionalist is Mike Roth. And unfortunately, that leaves Ponce out. I like Ponce as a person, but as a leader, I do not.
Okay. And why do you feel so strongly about following the Constitution over laws politicians dream up?
Very good question. The founding fathers were very intelligent. They get a bad rap from the progressives today. They recognize that men in and of themselves, and women, whoever's a part of mankind, inherently we tend, especially when it comes to power, we have this tendency to want more power. And Thomas Jefferson said famously, when it comes to power, that we should not go with what man wants to do, but we need to restrain him with the Constitution. So with the Constitution, our rights are inalienable. So whether there's a Constitution or not, our rights exist. We have inalienable rights. But with the Constitution, it's a reminder, it was laid out very wisely to tell the government, number one, it's supposed to be limited. As we see today, government's gone way away from that. Having a limited government under the Constitution to limit the power of the government itself. So it's that reminder. So I stick with the Constitution wholeheartedly, because as long as it stands, we do have a way to point the government back and say, no, you cannot do this. We will go by the rule of law, not by the whimsical choices of the ever-changing. The progressive mind says that the Constitution is a living, breathing document, always changing. The falsity of that is the heart and the mind of man hasn't changed. So the whole idea of the Constitution is to restrain those tendencies, and those tendencies haven't changed over time. And so we need to stick with the Constitution. Another thing too, because I know within the progressive movement, the move to this, it's a living, breathing document. They lean heavily into the United Nations philosophy. Under the United Nations philosophy, your rights come from government, and you have rights, but they can change, and those are open to whatever they believe is best as a governing body. But under our Constitution, your rights do not change. Your rights are inalienable. So ultimately, the only way to really have and secure freedom is to have the Constitution and to recognize inalienable rights. And again, that comes back right to Mike Roth, who supports that wholeheartedly and will not move away from that and ensure that every citizen of La Paz County has their rights protected.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I can say there's a few things with Mike Roth that that really stand out. He's spoken several times at local events, and in one event, he's got 10 points that he's planning on implementing when he becomes sheriff. He's the only candidate who has a plan. So I know I watched one of the speeches with Chief Ponce, and he talked about all of his experience from this place to this place to this place, and said there's problems, but didn't specify what the problems were. It didn't specify how they're going to get fixed, other than to say he's going to repeat what we're doing now. Well, most people here in Quartzsite would say that most of us don't want it repeated. I don't think things are as good as I think there's a portion of folks that think things are good, and there are those that have experienced it. I've recently been brought up on charges falsely, and they should have not ever come to me. I got to admit, I used to challenge folks like Mike Roth, and I'd say, our police is good. And then I experienced charges that aren't correct. So I got a real eye-opening. And within the 10-point plan, you have a lot of things that are really good. For example, I wrote some notes down from his plan. So I mean, he's got things like going to have a weekly video update that's going to be online, so folks are going to be able to tune in, almost like the old fireside chats that were going a few years back. And he's going to be putting the board of supervisors in a video format too, and this has been real helpful here in Quartzsite. In Quartzsite, they do have the town council meetings on video, so you can go back and reference what's going on. So really great idea. There's going to be a suggestion box. He's got to implement a crime tip hotline. Great thing too, Mike Roth will not enforce red flag gun laws. Red flag gun laws, if somebody just suspects that they think that you might have some kind of an issue, they could call and report you, and they just take your guns. So it removes your due process, and he's going to guarantee that your Fourth Amendment due process with your guns is upheld. It's talking about doing firearms safety, firearms training, a gun range in Ehrenberg. Talk about deputizing and training qualified volunteers, because our county here, we're very spread out. If you drive from one end to the other, it'll take you a good 2.5, 3 hours in most cases. So it's a really big county. So we have a lot of problems with times in service, where officers are being deployed out of Parker. So if you've got something that's happening over here in Rainbow Acres, it takes half an hour for the police to get there. A lot can happen in a half hour. So another thing, Mike Roth will not enforce unconstitutional laws. So the unconstitutional laws from day one, he's not going to enforce those, and not going to be patrolling the interstate. There's a lot of issue with seeing our law officers in this town out on the interstate patrolling. So we're going to get the officers where they need to be, and that's in the neighborhoods, making contact with people and knowing who they have there. And there's some other points too, but he's got 10 points and they make sense. So I would encourage anybody that doesn't know, look those up. Yes, he's got his website, rothforsheriff.com, where you can get all 10 points. But he's got a plan. Another thing too, and I find this again. I mentioned that in the early part of my introduction. I've been married maybe 24 years, or maybe 25. My wife's going to kill me on this. Being faithful to your spouse, very important. And fortunately, I can say Mike Roth is the same way. Mike Roth has been faithful to his wife. Always. We can't say the same for the chief of police, and that's unfortunate. I won't go into the personal details on that. Anybody that's local knows there's issues in that area. And again, if you're not going to be faithful to your promise, your solemn promise to your spouse, what makes me think that you're going to be faithful to your oath to office? So there's some serious issues there. Again, overall, Mike Roth is, again, I would come right back to, it's going to come right back to the Constitution. You know what? He's going to rub some people the wrong way. So does Trump. But he's going to get the job done because he's not beholden to the system. Some of his signs talk about the good old boys. And as a matter of fact, that brings up, well, we'll leave that for another time. The good old boy system, there's a lot of protecting one police officer to another. He's not going to be beholden to that. He's outside of that system. The goal is to run a frugal office that obeys the Constitution. And I think that's what we're going to get with Mike Roth for sheriff.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
So how do you know that he is outside of this good old boy system, and how is he going to enforce his ideas to a system that's already been corrupted for so long?
Right. Good question. So Mike Roth has actually been in the area for a little over 15 years now. So well, first of all, he's not career law enforcement. He doesn't have a military background. So there's a structure, there's a whole mindset that comes with it. There are some good aspects to those things, but there's also some baggage that comes in there too. Number one, if we're getting most of our officers out of the military, there's a very militaristic, that's another thing too, that, our police, you look at the pictures of them, you look at a lot of them, they look like soldiers. We don't want our police looking like soldiers. They're not here to be soldiers. But if you're hiring most of them out of the military, they're going to be very soldier-like. And they're trained in the federal training to be very soldier-like. So it's a precedent that I know Mike Roth disagrees with. And because he doesn't have that background, he does not have that baggage coming in. And he's also been harassed, and he stood up for his rights now for over 15 years here. Has beat them in the courts every time that. I think he said in one speech he holds the record probably for being arrested more times than anybody else in the county. He's never been charged and convicted. So he beats him every time because the law is on his side. He's standing for his rights. And so he knows how to stand, and not only his own rights, but he stood up for other people's rights too. So he's had a whole barrage of experience with the law enforcement, and he's definitely not open to taking bribes. He holds to his own. For anybody that knows Mike Roth, you take any time knowing him at all, there's one thing Mike does. He sticks to his guns. I've been in yelling matches with him when we come out, still amicable on the other side, but he sticks to his guns, and he'll tell you why. And you know why. But with the good old boys, when you have the political side of things, what I see happening very often is you're not getting the full truth. You're getting the half truth, the smooth over answer. But with Mike Roth, you might ruffle your feathers, but you know what he means. And he means what he says, and he does what he means. So that's how I know he's outside the good old boy system. He's not beholden. He doesn't have that training background. And he's got a history of standing for the Constitution.